Welcome to Johnson City, Tennessee. In this slice of Tennessee hides a mall with a rather wild pastel aesthetic. Blue and pink as far as the eye can see. Come along and you'll see for yourself. Don't worry, we'll go over why this corridor seemed particularly bland compared to the rest of the mall. Under the guidance of Arlen Shopping Centers, the mall at Johnson City was built up in 1970 and opened in March 1971, originally under the name Miracle Mall Shopping Center. The mall would originally feature McCrory's, a movie theater, and a drugstore as supposed anchors. And over time, this roster would come to include Sears, Kroger, and Super X Drugs. The roster also makes mention of a Brits department store, which was an offshoot of the chain J.J. Newberry. However, this had to be a short-lived store, as I find no other mention of it after the newspaper it was cited in. With the mall kicking up success despite Brits, an expansion was called upon for the mall, which would add the quirky two-floor transition. This would bring in a new JCPenney store as well as a Miller's department store. As Kroger moved away to a new pad off-site, Piccadilly Cafeterias would move in to take its place. By now, we were looking at a lineup of Sears, JCPenney, Miller's, and Super X Drugs. Enter the 90s, where the mall continued its growth and success. Miller's would turn over to Hess's, although Hess's would go bankrupt shortly after. During this time, the mall would undergo a significant renovation to bring forward a new food court, which is still here today, along with a new department store to replace the old theater. This new department store was known as Profits. Meanwhile, Hess's would get filled in as a goodies store, and Parks-Belk would set up shop in the mall. Around 1996, Glimcher Realty would purchase the mall for the low price of $44 million. Clearly a steal, right? Profits and Belk had a little bit of a rivalry going, and by 2006, Profits would lose out and Belk would take over with a dual anchor setup that is still going, at least as of the making of this video. Around the same time, multiple stores were shuffled around to make way for demolition, which would bring in a new Dick's Sporting Goods. This store stands where Piccadilly Cafeterias used to. Additionally, there were plenty of tenant shuffling inside the mall itself as new, larger tenants came in and old ones departed. Goodies would be a significant loss to the mall, but the mall was able to counter this by turning the old anchor tenant into more mall space, which would accommodate Forever 21. Remember the way we came in? That used to be Goodies, and probably explains why that corridor looks so bland compared to the rest of the mall. JCPenney also expanded their store at the mall as business continued to flourish, even into the 2008 recession. Overall, the mall was still chugging along as the dominant retail center of Johnson City. Speaking of, it's not specified when the mall shed its Miracle Mall nameplate, but as it stands today, this mall is simply known as the Mall at Johnson City. Very creative. The 2010s would be much quieter compared to the bustle and expansion of the 2000s and before, and this is where we begin to see signs of decline. Sears would finally depart the mall in January 2020, but there's no real surprise there, as it was a long time coming. But once again, the current owners, Washington Prime, whom had acquired Glimcher Realty, announced plans to bring in a home goods store to fill in the empty Sears space. The store is expected to be open by now, but thanks to 2020, that's no guarantee anymore. Enter the future. And while vacancy is starting to climb, it does appear that the mall at Johnson City is still holding up. While the 90s pastels are starting to show their age, even if I think they're cool, it's still not a bad looking mall either. Here's to wishing Washington Prime and on-site management the best in keeping this mall going. Well, we got a few minutes before we wrap things up, and I gotta say, I was not expecting this much in the way of pastels. These corridors are just practically radiating mauve and salmon pink, offset slightly by bits of blue here and there. The food court is better behaved, and while the former Goodies is much more modern, it is kinda dull. That said, I would gladly take quirky, somewhat dated malls like these over something so bland that it makes me think about life in a bad way. You know which malls those are. It's also good to see that this mall is doing well for itself, and I'm sure being the only enclosed mall in town helps this place out greatly. The only competition I really see this mall facing is the Fort Henry Mall, which we'll see in a future video. And that mall's not doing well nowadays, be it from the pulverizing or just overall unfortunate events. So really, the mall at Johnson City has the chance to do better even in the future, barring any terrible disasters, be it natural, artificial, or dare I say, the P word. And that is just about it for the mall at Johnson City. What did you think about the place? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Share your comments below. And of course, subscribe if you haven't already. We still have more malls to see, and on top of that, I might just start throwing in some offshoots here and there on Wednesdays. So stick around for that. That's pretty nice. Thanks for having me, Johnson City. And until next time, this is Doomie Grunt wishing your mall farewell and good luck.